Out. Now, judges, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Thank you very much, and congratulations to making it to the top 12 here. My name is Candida Steele, and I'm retired as a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals, and I've retired to Maine. Steve?
I'm Steve Franzik. I'm a retired professor of political science in the U.S. Naval Academy.
And Lindsay, is Lindsay there?
Yeah.
I'm Lindsay Draper. I'm retired from the juvenile court bench here in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin.
Great. And could you tell us who you all are, please?
Good afternoon, judges. We are Unit 6, and our unit focuses on the challenges that face our democracy in the 21st century. My name is Molly Mallinger, and I'll be studying international relations at Syracuse University.
Hello, judges. I'm Ms. Pramala, and I'll be studying engineering at Johns Hopkins University.
Good afternoon, judges. My name is Matthew Esposito, and I'll be studying environmental science at the University of Connecticut.
Hello, judges. My name is Chelsea Morton, and I will be studying international relations at American University. But for now, we are all seniors at Trumbull High School. This is our coach, Ms. Bolin, and we thank you all for being here today.
Welcome, and thank you very much. And I'll read the question for the record here. Benjamin Lincoln wrote to Daniel Shays, we're going to do number 1. And Benjamin Lincoln wrote to Daniel Shays, quote, "Disband your deluded followers. Should you attempt to fire upon the troops of government, the consequences might be fatal to many of your men, the least guilty. What useful purposes, if any, have rebellions served throughout American history? Do the events of January 6, 2021 at the US Capitol constitute a rebellion? Why or why not? Are there rebellions in the world today that are justified? Why or why not? You may begin."
This is our house, cried the rebel. Members of the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, the Boogaloo Boys, and regular Trump supporters alike gathered at our nation's capital to interrupt the validation of electoral votes on January 6, 2021. With the goal of retaking a so-called stolen election, those who participated in January 6 certainly saw no rebellion, much less an unjustified one.
However, the ongoing FBI investigation of January 6th is the largest domestic attack investigation in American history, and one of the largest of all time, surpassed only by 9/11. As of January 2022, there are 704 criminal charges against the accused January 6 rebels.
According to the Oxford Dictionary, rebellion is defined as the act or process of resisting authority, control, or establishment, usually with violence. And January 6 left 5 dead and more than 100 injured in the process of overthrowing a democratic process. While there is much to litigate in a court of law, what is indisputable is that January 6 was nothing less than an unjustified rebellion.
With that being said, rebellions, justified or not, can offer valuable insight into the flaws of government and help society move towards a more perfect union. Shays' Rebellion, led by farmer Daniel Shays in response to high taxes and a poor economic condition, highlighted the instability of the Articles of Confederation, revealing to the founders that they were an unsustainable framework for the American government.
Conversely, the swift failure of the Whiskey Rebellion, following the ratification of the Constitution, revealed to the founders and the American people that increased centralization of power to the federal government was a necessary change to ensure the well-being of the nation.
Moreover, Nat Turner's rebellion and John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry demonstrated to Southern slave owners that African Americans would not just sit silently with slavery, heightening tensions and motivating the North out of complacency. This provided the impetus for change that culminated in the Civil War and the second founding of the United States, revolutionizing the concept of constitutional equality for all citizens, regardless of race.
Of course, America is hardly the only country to make use of transformative rebellion. As stated in the Declaration of Independence, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Across the globe, millions of people have stood up against authoritative governments in order to create a more perfect union for their people.
In Hong Kong, protesters have been resisting China's recent extradition bill, which would allow criminal suspects to be brought to China under vague circumstances, giving China the ability to target activists and journalists who are critical of China and its actions. These protests have been going on since 2019, and Hong Kong civilians have actively fought for the rights of due process for their fellow citizens, resisting China's attempts to take over the judicial system and exercise unchecked power over criminal suspects.
Just this past February, Russia invaded Ukraine in an unprovoked grab for power. Thousands of Ukrainians outside of the military organized to fight for their country, resisting Russian tanks and military forces to preserve their sovereignty. And over the past 2 years, the Tigrayan people have formed paramilitaries to combat their ethnic cleansing in Ethiopia, fighting against an existential threat to their communities and livelihoods.
Meanwhile, the insurrectionists at Capitol Hill were fighting a free and fair election that was repeatedly verified across numerous court cases and investigations. How can the deaths and injuries of innocents be justified when the perpetrators of January 6th had the tools of democracy and due process at their fingertips?
January 6th was a dark page in American history that should be considered as no less than unjustified rebellion. When we see justified rebellions, we should think of those between genocide, ethnic cleansing, an existential invasion, or lack of human rights. Rebellion is not a choice, but an undeniable necessity.
Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you very much. That was a very good summary. Thank you. Do you think that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is implicated in January 6th event? How do you think that should be handled in relation to the insurrection?
Well, in the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it prohibits people, government officials, from participating in insurrections, and says that if they do participate in insurrections, that they should be subjected to a trial of impeachment. And if they get a 2/3 vote, then they shall effectively be removed. And I think with regards to January 6th, that shows that former President Donald Trump, that Marjorie Taylor Greene, and that anyone else involved should be subjected to removal. Former President Donald Trump was subjected to an impeachment trial, but was not effectively removed from office. If we see that Marjorie Taylor Greene is on trial, and we hope that she is held accountable, because according to the federal laws, it said that any federal official or any person who does participate in an insurrection shall be fined and shall have 10 years in prison and should not be able to hold political office ever again. So they should be held accountable under that.
Put yourself in the place of those who are the most violent of the demonstrators on January 6th and justify how they're going to justify what they did to their children and grandchildren.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yes, what is the justification that the demonstrators might use for their violent actions on January 6th?
I would think that the way that January 6th protests would justify their actions off Capitol, we argue that they did not receive fair due process in the court of law. They probably argue that the system is being against them, that they're not receiving fairness in the courts and fairness in the decisions of whether or not the election were fair. And I would think they would draw parallels to the American Revolution, and how in the American Revolution, people also faced disenfranchisement and weren't really given the right to vote, the right to express their views in office. So people at January 6th would likely think of themselves as facing a similar situation to disenfranchisement, as they believe that the election was rigged against them.
I would argue that the January 6th insurrectionists believe that they could utilize the 12th Amendment and former Vice President Mike Pence in order to overthrow the 2020 election, as they believe that if they could use the 12th Amendment and for Vice President Mike Pence in order to stop certain states from counting their votes, and then the said vote would go to the House of Representatives, where they would be able to gain the presidency, as when the vote goes to the House, they vote by states. So even though Democrats had more seats, the Republicans controlled more states. So then they believe that former President Trump would win.
I believe that the justification that many January 6th protesters have used is sort of paralleling themselves to American revolutionaries fighting against British oppression. And we can even see how many January 6th protesters have seen themselves as oppressed. They've seen how the information that they've been fed on the media, especially in this age of the internet where media is very biased, there's propaganda everywhere. They see themselves as victims of an oppressive system of which where their right to vote was being either thrown out or discontinued or whatever it may be. So they went to the Capitol and they were essentially attempting to persuade legislators' votes against this bill. As Jefferson stated, he believed that it was the right to alter or abolish the government whenever the government becomes destructive of the ends of taking the rights away from the people. And I think that this whole idea of rebelling and revolution in the American government has really been glorified. And I think that's how they sort of perceive themselves.
So let me just sort of posit to you or tend to, because you started by listing a group of people who are very self-righteous and take the position that what we've got to say is what ought to be. And I believe you said, this is our house. I take the position, and I want you to tell me how we avoid this happening in the future, that what happened was some people who childishly don't understand the concept that you lost. And because they're not able to accept that, they will make up some stuff. They'll try and reach in history. How do we keep that from happening again?
I think one of the biggest ways to keep that from happening is to invest in civics education. Most school systems only invest about 5 cents per student into civic education versus $57 into STEM-based education. If we were to invest more money into civics education, students would be able to learn how their democracy works, how the Constitution works, so that they can realize that they lost an election and to move on and accept that.
I believe that one possible solution for the avoidance of another January 6th or another attack on the Capitol to this scale is, for number one, to sort of apply the same measures to both sides of the spectrum, the political spectrum. As we've seen, as former President Donald Trump evacuated Lafayette Square to hold a photo shoot for himself for his own good campaign. And he evacuated with tear gas, with military, while Capitol rioters at January 6th were able to just walk into the Capitol. Some even said that police actually let them in as their defense for why they didn't commit anything wrong. So I think that, along with putting more control over the internet and this whole Pandora's box of the internet where misinformation propaganda go wild, a possible reinstatement of the FCC fairness doctrine on the various social media websites where we can control misinformation, have a grasp on what people are seeing, what people see as the reality of American politics today.
I believe it is about accountability. And I believe that we should hold the leaders and the people who incited this violence accountable, particularly former President Donald Trump. At approximately 6:00 p.m. on January 6th, Donald Trump tweeted that this is what happens when an election is stolen, and that this should be a day to remember, essentially praising the people who committed violence and insurrected our Capitol. He is planning to run again in 2024. So I believe that as Americans, what we can do to hold him accountable is remember what he has caused and vote accordingly.
How can we go about getting major change in government without rebellion?
There are plenty of peaceful avenues that people can take to see change in government. The entirety of the civil rights movement under Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision was to peacefully resist against unjust laws. As he said, we have a moral responsibility to obey just laws, but also disobey unjust laws. It's a necessity for us to resist passively against laws such as segregation and such as disenfranchisement. And today, laws such as police brutality and other laws that we see as unjust, as that is the biggest way we can see the government change and respond to the people's plights.
Thank you. Under what circumstances, if any, do you think participants should be held accountable for the events of January 6th? I know there are certainly criminal cases going on for the people who actually were in the Congress, but do you have any thinking beyond that?
As stated, and according to federal law, as I previously stated, it says that anyone who participates in an insurrection and that type of sedition should be fined or serve 10 years in prison. I believe that we should use that federal policy in holding these people accountable, because whether they incited violence, whether they actively participated in violence, there's no really gray area. In federal law, it says that they should be fined or serve 10 years in prison?
Accountability is one of the main aspects of this post-January 6th insurrection type of reformation. And we can actually look back to the Reconstruction Acts after the Civil War, where Confederate generals and Confederate sympathizers were held accountable to an extent, where we take some power, where we convict people and hold these people accountable. For example, today, we are really lacking in accountability. We've seen how former chief of staff of former President Donald Trump, Mark Meadows, is sort of getting away with how he has aided the rebellion, how he has promoted the rebellion. And we've seen all these arguments of how insurrectionists at January 6th are saying that the police let them in, that they did nothing wrong. So I really think that accountability is something that we could look back on and sort of enforce today based on past precedents.
I definitely agree. However, I think we should look into the 5 points of each person who was at January 6th and evaluate whether or not they did actually commit violence, or if they were, may I continue?
Go ahead, finish your sentence.
Or if they were simply just at the rally beforehand, before violence was actually incited on the Capitol, using surveillance and key witnesses who are there, like the media.
Great, what a great job. Thank you so much. Thank you. Steve, do you want to start commentary?
Okay. Yeah, good job. You did a good job of defining your terms to kick things off. You had some good historical examples. You had also some good contemporary kinds of examples. You're up in terms of what the news is, in terms of what's going on, in terms of the application of the 14th Amendment. I thought that was a strong discussion that you had. So overall, congratulations for reaching this far.
Exactly, Lindsay.
You were just enjoyable to listen to. I very much appreciated the fact, I have to tell you, I was so happy that you started out the way that you did, because there are so few people willing to say, there's some bad actors in the world who got the ear of some Americans. And maybe there were some folks who meant well, but there were some people who did not mean well, who led the street. I was so pleased the way you all did that. I just have to give you a hand on that. The rest of it was enjoyable, but you had me in your pocket right with that. So good luck and congratulations.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I thought that was a really nice presentation. I agree with my colleagues on the people that you listed and the 14th Amendment. That's an interesting issue that we're going to need to be taking a look at as we go down the road. I especially appreciated your reference to the fairness doctrine, because I think that also, in addition to all the internet issues, that's been one of the problems that we've had. So in details, I thought you did a really lovely job. In person, though, I'm hopeful that you are as proud of yourselves as we all are of you, because I think you did a really excellent job, and that you've shown us that you know a whole lot more underneath the, when you peel away the levels of the onion, there's a whole lot more in there that you know. And so you're just shown us the top of the iceberg of what you know. And boy, is that what we're hoping to accomplish in civic education, is to have you all understand what the purpose of the government is and how it operates. Now that you know that, I hope that whatever you choose to do in your life otherwise, that you'll, in addition to being wonderful citizens, that you'll consider influencing the people around you and help educate the people around you, so that encourage them to vote, so that when they do, they know what they're talking about as well. And I hope you'll seriously consider being an elected representative, state, local, or federal government, but also think about working in the government in some fashion or not, because we need very much to have well-educated government employees and who understand what the purpose of government is, and to carry it out as well. So there's many, many, many ways that we can use your wonderful expertise, and I hope you'll take advantage of that. And I suspect that this program has inspired you enough to do so. So it's been a pleasure to hear you, and thank you very much. We've very much enjoyed your presentation.
Can I just add that watching the teacher and the level of pride that she has been so cool. I don't know, young people, if you all can tell what's happening here, but she is clearly so proud of you, and that has made us all feel so good. I'm sorry. I know I was supposed to be done.
Thank you all.
Very much, Katie. Thank you.